Welcome back to Buy or Buy. Today, we're looking at the 1986 to 1992 Toyota Supra, the Mk3, codenamed A70, the turbocharged straight-six Supra that came before the legendary Mk4. It's gorgeous, it's torquey, it's endlessly tunable, and it's finally appreciating. But it carries one infamous flaw that decides everything, which is why this one is a maybe. A turbocharged rear-drive Supra with the engine that paved the way for the 2JZ, now appreciating from around $20,000. But mind the head gasket. This one's a maybe. Section 1. Who and cross-shop. Profile and alternatives. So who's the target buyer here? Well, we're talking about enthusiasts who want a tunable, appreciating 1980s Japanese turbo classic. You want that genuine, undeniable Supra pedigree, right? But, and this is absolutely crucial, you've got to be a disciplined buyer who's willing to shop carefully. This is definitely not a car for someone looking to just blindly buy a low-mileage time capsule and hope for the best. You really need to know what you're getting into. Now, when you're hunting in this very specific 80s and early 90s JDM market, you've naturally got to look at the alternatives. Obviously, there's the legendary M4 Supra, but let's be real, that sits in a completely different, far pricier stratosphere today. You'll probably also look at contemporaries like the Nissan 300ZX twin-turbo or the Mazda RX-7. Great cars, but both of those come with incredibly complex, tightly packaged engine bays and, frankly, their own pretty intense maintenance curves. But honestly, the most compelling alternative is the 1992 to 2000 Lexus SC300. It's slightly newer, it actually shares its architecture directly with the M4 Supra, and it comes packing the absolute bulletproof 3.0-liter naturally aspirated 2JZ inline-six. If you want that Supra DNA without the giant asterisk, the SC300 is the ultimate safe play. Bottom line, genuine Supra pedigree for 80s nostalgia seekers willing to shop smart. Section 2. The gems. Pedigree, chassis, tunability, and looks. Okay, the 1986.5 model year was a massive pivotal moment in Toyota's history. This was the exact moment the Supra nameplate officially divorced the Celica line, finally becoming a dedicated, rear-wheel drive Grand Tourer in its own right. And man, they absolutely nailed the Grand Touring hardware. Underneath, you're getting a fully independent forged aluminum suspension, solid four-wheel disc brakes, and a limited slip diff to put all that power down. And visually, come on, that straight-edged, angular 80s styling, complete with those iconic pop-up headlights, it's just aging beautifully on the collector market right now. Clean, unmodified turbo manual cars are actively climbing in value, easily clearing 30 grand in today's market. And this brilliantly illustrates the true pedigree of the A70. While the early cars were naturally aspirated, the real headline here is the turbocharged 7M GTE they introduced in 1987. This 3.0-liter twin-cam turbocharged inline-six pumped out 230 horsepower, which got a nice little bump up to 232 horsepower and 254 pound-feet of torque for the 1989 to 1992 model years. This engine is legendary, guys. It was Toyota's modern turbo straight-six that directly preceded and, frankly, inspired the immortal 2JZ. So the really crucial point here is the tunability. Despite the massive flaw we're about to dive into, the 7M engine has an incredibly stout, totally overbuilt bottom end. Much like the 2JZ that followed it, the stock block, crank, and rods are just immensely robust. If you throw on the right turbocharger, handle the fueling upgrades, and secure that cylinder head, this factory bottom end confidently handles 400 to 500 plus horsepower. No sweat. Bottom line, a gorgeous, torquey, endlessly tunable Grand Tour with real Supra pedigree. Section 3. The issues. The flaw that decides everything. All right, it's time to shift gears. Every legendary car has its dark side, and the A70 Supra definitely carries a few aging flaws, alongside one massive, literal, deal-breaking factory error that you simply cannot ignore. Let's start small here. In the minor category, you're going to expect your typical 1990s electrical gremlins. The interior plastics get brittle, and that highly complex, button-heavy dashboard layout is inevitably going to have a few dead switches. Moving up to the moderate issues, the factory oil punk is pretty marginal, meaning if the engine starves for lubrication, you are going to spin a rod bearing. Also, that incredibly strong R154 5-speed manual transmission, it's notorious for wearing out its second and third gear synchronizers, which gives you that annoying cold shift grind. And of course, on a chassis that's pushing past 30 years old, rust on the rear wheel arches and rocker panels is a constant enemy. But frankly, all of that completely pales in comparison to the critical issue. We need to zero in entirely on the one flaw that dictates everything. 58. That is the factory torque specification in pound-feet for the 7M cylinder head bolts, and it is a fatal engineering error. Toyota simply under-torqued the head bolts straight from the factory. Over time and through thousands of thermal cycles, these factory bolts actually stretch. They lose their clamping force, and that guarantees a blown head gasket on virtually every single 7M engine, turbo or not. The coolant mixes with the oil, the cylinders lose compression, and boom, the car leaves you stranded. Now, thankfully, because this problem is so incredibly infamous, the fix is thoroughly understood and honestly not crazy expensive. But hear me on this. It is absolute, non-negotiable, mandatory maintenance. First, the cylinder head has to be removed and checked for warping. If it's warped past 0.008 inches, it goes straight to the machine shop. Second, you completely ditch that factory composite gasket and throw in a multi-layer steel, or MLS, head gasket. Third, and this is the most important part, you never reuse those factory bolts. You install aftermarket ARP head studs and torque them down securely to 75 pound-feet using Moly lubricant. The only real saving grace here is that the 7M is a non-interference engine. That means even if the gasket fully lets go, the pistons aren't going to crash into the valves. But you must never, ever buy a low-mileage gamble without documented, verified paperwork proving this exact procedure has been done.
Bottom line, an incredible engine, fatally flawed. Only buy with documented ARP stud proof.
Section 4. Verdict. Maybe. The final call. Which brings us to our final structured evaluation. We've weighed that glorious grand touring pedigree against the massive mechanical liability, and it's time to make our call on the Mk3 Supra. Verdict, maybe. The 1986 to 1992 Toyota Supra is a genuinely tempting one. This is a gorgeous, torquey, endlessly tunable grand tourer with real super pedigree. The 7M GTE is literally the engine that paved the way for the immortal 2JZ, and clean examples are appreciating fast as collectors rediscover it. But the entire verdict hinges on one thing: the head gasket. Because of Toyota's factory torque error, nearly every one of these engines will blow its head gasket. So a car that hasn't had a proper ARP stud and metal gasket repair, that's a liability just waiting to strand you. Buy one that's already been fixed correctly with the paperwork to prove it, and you've got a brilliant, characterful classic on your hands. Buy a cheap, unverified one, and you're literally signing up for a rebuild. So maybe a documented, properly repaired turbo manual. Buy a low-mileage car with no head gasket history. And absolutely cross-shop the SC300 if you want the bulletproof 2JZ with no asterisks attached.
Bottom line, a wonderful pre-2JZ Supra, but only if the head gasket has been sorted.
So, we leave you with this. Knowing the stakes and knowing the exact mechanical cost of entry, will you hunt for a documented, sorted A70 to capture that pure 1980s pop-up headlight magic? Or are you going to play it safe, skip the head gasket anxiety entirely, and cross-shop the Lexus SC300 for that bulletproof 2JZ peace of mind? The choice, and the wrenching, is yours.